Hello and welcome to Mental Health Matters. My name is Matt Ray, and here at Starr Commonwealth, we're celebrating 110 years of healing and fostering resilience in children. Our series Mental Health Matters is focused on a community approach to solving the national emergency in childhood mental health. We're thankful for our sponsors, including our diamond level sponsors, Oaklawn, Angel Saints and Stuff, ITC, and Southern Michigan Bank and Trust. Thank you so much for your generosity to you and all of our wonderful sponsors. You can visit star.org/110 to learn more about our 110th anniversary. Today's topic is a concerning one as we enter the fall and the rumblings of back to school with many districts already in classrooms. And throughout the summer, and my panelists will certainly speak to this as well, but there's been a concern over discipline, over student behavior and consequences. And we wanted to come together today to simply talk about what solutions are out there when we take a trauma-informed and resilience-focused approach to this conversation. So as I introduce my panelists, let's start with a strength-based approach, if we don't mind introducing ourselves, and let's hear our greatest hopes for both our students, our teachers, even potentially families as we enter the new year. We'll start with Shay.
Sure. My name is Dr. Shaylin Soma, and I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at Starr Commonwealth. And as I think about the upcoming school year and what my greatest hope would be, I guess through the perspective of a professional and a parent, maybe it's that we're able to see the positive impact that we have on children, even if those are few and far between, and those aren't overshadowed by the hard parts of the education system that we're navigating.
Hello, my name is Kathy Hart, and I am the Director of Training and a Program Consultant here at Starr Commonwealth. And one of the things that I hope for students and families and teachers is one of the things I talk about when I'm training in schools is one of my favorite outcomes is for our schools when we go in and train is that when educators feel a sense of self-efficacy, when they're faced with difficult challenges or adversities in their classroom, that they go into their classrooms and feel good about what they're doing at the end of the day, that they get that sense of joy and pride of and those feelings of why they went into education in the first place, that returns to them if they're having those struggles. That's one of my hopes for them, because I want them to feel good about what they're doing with the young people, and that the students then feel that the teacher's happy in the classroom, and that they feel that sense of joy and connection to their teacher and to that classroom and to the school. I think that would just really, that's something I really want to, when I walk away from a school, working with a school, that's really something I feel good about when I know that the teachers and students have that feeling.
Well said.
Thanks, Jenny.
I concur. I'm Jenny Sloan. I'm the Clinical Director of Starr Behavioral Health. My hope for this year is that kindness prevails and connection across community prevails. And that is that the integration, a greater integration of school leadership, school personnel, students and families, and other partnerships and communities. I can't tell you how many times I hear a parent express just joy that their kid's teacher likes them. Mm-hmm. And that's where the connection is built. And without that, there's no learning elsewhere. So, I know that the years of the pandemic really posed a lot of threat, fractured those partnerships and connections. And my hope is that those connections can be restored and strengthened this year.
That need for connection, and Kathy, you mentioned this reason why educators got into education in the first place for these kids, and those types of ideas are often not what we're hearing in the summers. As we rest and relax and take some very needed R&R, that quickly starts to be growing concern and potentially stress and the unknown about this next year. I'm curious for the panel what we've been hearing from educators and maybe even parents throughout the summer in regards to behavior and discipline and consequences in that regard.
Yeah, I know I hear that educators go into education to really want to work with kids and help kids and teach kids, and they're concerned that if we don't discipline children and students, that we're setting them up for failure, that I'll hear questions like, well, they can't talk to their boss that way when they leave, when they get a job, and they can't, they're not going to be able to manage their life, or they can't go to college, and in some cases, they're even concerned about some of the schools we go into is, are they even going to be able to survive, into adulthood if they, say the wrong thing to the wrong person, and they're really concerned about if they don't discipline them and teach them things in school, where's that student going to be when they're 24, 25, 30 years old? And so they're really trying to structure things and to discipline students. And sometimes, when we say discipline, what does that mean? Sometimes that, we would look at that as almost a punishment versus discipline. And so sometimes, I think the intentions are really good in our schools. But one of the things I talk a lot about is the intention versus the impact. Our intentions are to discipline our students and to teach them something, but the impact sometimes can be more traumatizing and stressful to our students, which then we know doesn't help them learn. So we're hearing some things like that.
Yeah, and I think with that being said, we're communicating to educators to try to look at kids from a trauma-informed lens. And educators understand that, and then I think that there's a significant fear and overwhelm about the sheer number of kids in their classroom that have stress and have trauma, and then the responding mental health symptoms and reactions that lead to behaviors that are very challenging, and it just becomes this overwhelm. It's kind of like, a teacher might say, I would love to be trauma informed, but I don't know how to do that when I have this many kids with such challenging and high need behaviors. So it's just the how to even wrap your arms around that, in addition to everything else that educators are responsible for taking care of.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if we can take that idea of the classroom and growing teacher shortage concerns and growing classroom numbers, what can we do about getting to know so many kids in the classroom, all while teaching and managing behavior? How do we do it?
Well, one thing that I am so excited about is one of the things I absolutely love about my job is either virtually or now that the country's opened up more, traveling, hearing all across the country that more and more people are using what Dr. Soma has written about in our 10 Steps, the book, 10 Steps to a Trauma-Informed Resilient School, our connections assessment, which is really awesome, where basically you're just doing an assessment on who actually has relationships with students. And some schools have even taken some steps to qualify that by a relationship means that one or two non-academic things about a student. And then when you know who has relationships, and who doesn't, you're actually having really intentional, making really intentional interventions to make relationships with those kids who don't have those connections. And then finding out things about those kids and then passing that information along to the other people in your building, especially those young people that maybe those high needs that Dr. Soma was just mentioning, those tier 2 and tier 3 kids that need more support, passing that along to your other professionals in your building so that we all know something about that student. So say Johnny has 3 siblings and loves baseball. Well, I can tell that to Jenny, and Jenny can talk to Johnny in the hallway about the Dodgers or the Braves or whoever, right? So then Johnny feels that sense of connection.
Tell them about the one teacher
who
when he does attendance.
Yeah, and so another strategy is a school I was recently at. A teacher doesn't because like Shay mentioned, you can have a lot of kids in the classroom that have really high needs. And how do I do all this with the limited time that I have? And so one of the teachers said one way that he does this is when he takes attendance, he'll ask a question of the day. And so they're supposed to say, what's your favorite baseball team? Hi, my name's Jenny and I like the LA Dodgers. And so every day you're learning something new about the student and it's not really taking any more time out of your day. And so that not only are you learning about the student, but the student's like, hey, the teacher wants to know something about me. So it's like, it's double right there. It's a connection both ways. It's the kids feeling like, hey, the teacher cares about me. And then you as a teacher are learning something, and they can make little notes and write them down. You can share that. I know teachers are sharing all the information on Google Docs and things like that. So there's all these little strategies that really don't take that much more time. It's like out of box thinking and, sharing those strategies with each other.
Sure. That connections assessment that you mentioned, which is available on star.org, one of the most compelling features of that is the ability to bring all of our teachers together at the beginning of the year. Before we sat down, we were talking about the professional development weeks and the like that are happening right now. And there's not many opportunities once school gets started to put all of our staff together in front of all of our students, whether it be pictures and names, or actual, that fresh start. We talk about every year. I often wonder what can we do to make sure that connections assessment that happens every year is home base for this fresh start of the school year.
I think one of the things that's important is that it doesn't live in a vacuum, and that connections assessment gives you information, and then use it, and then weaving that into, like Kathy was saying, not that we're doing something extra, but maybe we're doing something differently. We all know it's important to understand our students, our clients, our whatever kiddo you're working with, to understand them before you're doing the higher ordered complex things like teaching and enlisting the executive functioning, right? We got to get into that limbic area. We have to get into that, how you feel safe, your heart rate, temperature, all of the things that our materials help support teaching and approaching whatever task it is with that sensory-based lens. Also, knowing that the child's developmental stage is a key thing to understand when you're engaging them, however you're engaging them. And that said, I have this conversation a lot with educators who have a hard time understanding the trauma-informed piece. Misnomers like trauma is supposed to be indicated as an excuse for bad behavior, or how do I know their trauma history? And to which I say, no, it's just asking, what is it like to be you? How is it difficult for you in ways that I can't understand yet? Whatever that is.
And it's so interesting to me how what all of us need more than anything is reassurance and validation. And the way to give that to somebody is to be curious and to just, wonder. Like, I'm just wondering about you. I'm wondering, who are your friends? Who do you sit and eat lunch with? I'm wondering which class or which course do you feel like you're good at? Which one is hard for you, right? Is it tough for you to make it through the whole day? Do you get really hungry in the morning because you have C lunch instead of A lunch? Those things that we're asking kids. And I think the more that we're curious, the more it makes them feel safe because they feel heard and known and understood. And then, as you said, the learning can take off.
And it's nothing extra. It's just on the spectrum of getting there. Whether you stop at the socialization station because you're the school social worker, or you just check in about how school was this week because you're the therapist, or the math teacher, and it's all about attunement. And that's what, when I speak to school professionals groups or hospitals or what, I like to stay in the developmental station. Because when you work with children, attunement is key. And I know that's a clinical concept, but education, clinical work, hospital settings, anywhere folks are being helped, where children are being helped or taught or supported, these concepts are so important. And so kind of debunking this idea that you're doing something extra or in addition to, which is extra, sorry teachers, with how stressed the education system is right now, ask them to do another thing. No, but maybe another way. So it's all about how we have those conversations and can reframe the expectations.
Well, you were a teacher.
Yes, I was. Yes, I was, and I loved it. And I often brag that I I'd have an ensemble of 65, 70 kids, and you couldn't hear a pin drop, or you could hear a pin drop. And my classroom management techniques were rapport. Now, as a music teacher, I had them after school and I had them on weekends, and so I was a part of different factions of their lives. So it was kind of a cheat sheet. We're not going to ask like a physicist teacher to be able to, but that's the part, is getting to know all those parts, getting to know what they care about, what's difficult, how you can help. And then when I learned about polyvagal theory, I realized that having them sing was really doing the work for me, because the humming was engaging their vagus nerve, and it wasn't the magic of me at all. It was science. But that's good news for everyone, because it's accessible to anyone who wants to learn how to do things a different way.
It's so fascinating to me to think about that beginning of the year, and to hear you, Jenny, talk about the brain science behind these connections that we're making, and knowing that all these teachers are hitting the ground running and they have curriculum to start going with. And so it's almost become, that punchline of that first week of, we're just getting to know each other, but science says it's one of the most important weeks of the year. And if we're not coming together as an entire building for these connections assessments, where we can build on what we're learning about each of these kiddos year after year, it's a really tough thing to accomplish in that short amount of time, not to mention all the buy-in that the teacher needs to receive from those kids in order for it to actually stick. It's a very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I don't have a follow-up there, but it's just a comment.
I almost
Yeah.
and I almost see connection as being as important as, did the child have a good night's sleep? Did they have something to eat? And do they feel safe? Do they feel connected? It's like, it's one of the foundation pieces. Before we can leave and do our jobs, we have to feel like we slept and we ate and whatever else, is the non-negotiable for us. It's just a foundation. You look at the physiology, and those pieces create physiology that allows a child to learn and to stay regulated.
Well, we know, right, that when students feel connected to their school, it's the strongest factor in reducing anxiety, depression, suicide, and it's a protective factor for all students, regardless of ethnicity or income. So we know that science tells us that about the power of connection. So, it's absolutely right that is foundational.
Yeah. So taking that time initially, I know you're talking about as we start the school year, what can we do? We have we have a handful of superintendents that we work with. One stands out to me, though, who just says, please don't worry about curriculum at first. I want you to have your classroom meetings and your circles, and this should be happening every single day, even if it's for 5 minutes, just to get to know your kids.
Yeah, that's great. We spent this whole time in a panel theoretically about student behavior, talking about connection. I think that speaks volumes. But let's talk about behavior. Let's talk about potentially discipline and consequences and that nature. Shay, in your book, 10 Steps to Create a Trauma-Informed Resilient School, you wrote, trauma-informed schools avoid consequences such as frequent detentions, suspensions, and timeouts, because they understand that behavior is driven by private logic and past experiences. Instead, they use positive interactions and provide opportunities to support regulation. Can you expand on that a little bit as we kind of dive into the meat of discipline and consequences?
Absolutely. So this is, I think, as a trainer and as somebody in the mental health field, this is the hardest conversation to have with an educator. Because when you talk about being trauma-informed and you mention that those typical ways of disciplining or punishing a child are not effective with kids who have experienced trauma, they get really nervous and really worried for good reason, because they feel that their whole classroom climate is going to fall apart. And that's because the message that we often forget to give them is that it's not that there are no consequences. It's just the kind of consequences that we're implementing. And the other missing piece is that we have to have consequences for things that make sense, and we have to always keep expectations high. So I think what happens is they think, oh my gosh, no consequences. It's going to be a free-for-all. How am I going to manage this? It's just a free, oh, this kid experienced trauma. It's a free pass. They can do whatever they want. And in our messaging, what we try to really highlight is that we want expectations to stay extremely high. Expectations for academics, expectations for your classroom climate, for behavior, for regulation. But with that comes needed support, right? So when you're not a traumatized child and you're able to sit and learn and feel regulated, you may not need additional supports. But supports are often needed for kids that are already in a state of dysregulation. So kind of long way to say, we want to keep the expectation high, but we also want to say to ourselves, what do each of these students in my classroom need for them to be able to meet what expectation is that we're setting for them, right? And the consequence that's going to happen as a result doesn't have to be pushing them away or sending them out of the classroom, or, otherwise known as severing the connection that we're trying to establish with them. It has to be logical or natural, right? So we talk a lot about just natural and logical consequences. Natural consequences are things that we don't even have to impose, right? It's like, it'll just happen. The consequence that they have when they push a kid down at recess because then nobody else wants to play with them is all they need. They don't also need to stand on the wall. They don't also need to be sent home, right? I mean, you can have a conversation about it and, connect the dots of you did this and now you're seeing that your friends aren't wanting to play. Can you see how that makes sense, right? Restorative, right? Or a logical consequence if, you left all your sidewalk chalk out and didn't clean it up at recess, and guess what? It rained, and now the next day the class, you guys don't have your sidewalk chalk, right? Or you don't have your Mac computers because people were not taking care of them, and we had to kind of close down that lab for a couple days. So I think that it's not about no consequences. It's about the kind of consequences, and it has to be. We have to kick that off with a conversation about, I'm going to keep expectations high, and I'm also going to be curious about the supports that are needed. And in that way, it's still giving educators something to use and to follow. They have a guide, at least.
Yeah, and that's so important so I think we have to sometimes lead with that just before you ask if I'm saying no consequences. No, we love consequences, especially with trauma-informed care, because in trauma, there's no beginning, middle, or end. That's the frightening thing. It's fright without solution. So if a kiddo is not on some sort of a structured plan, and it doesn't have to be an IEP or a behavioral plan, 504 or anything like that, but just so if this, then that. That's structure, predictability. That's all the things kids need to feel safe. All kids, but particularly kids who are struggling with a trauma-informed theme.
They need more structure. They need more consistency.
They need more of that. So thank you. That's the message I sent to teachers. Is like, oh no, we need to up the dose here.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, so it's going to be this, then this, then this. You can count on it, and once you can count on it and you come through, it's like a promise that you deliver. Then I can, okay, now I can anticipate, and I can. The other piece of that with discipline, Dan Siegel talks about disciples, right? You're teaching. That's what discipline's about, teaching. And if there's no consequence, there's no learning. So we're certainly, in all of our departments, we're certainly, integrated, understanding of, oh no, we want more learning.
As opposed to punishment. Yeah. And we know what punishment means, right? To inflict pain. Yeah. And how is it going to help if we're hurting? And punishing doesn't teach, right? So what I see over and over again, especially with traumatized children, is that a punishment makes them feel worse about the person they are than they already were before, right? It typically just shuts down their nervous system or kicks them even more so into that fight-flight response or fawn response, like, okay, I'm just gonna please you. Or they're so scared that maybe their behavior stops for a minute, but it's because they're so scared and really terrified of what might happen. And it seems like every punishment just takes kids either out of the classroom or out of the building, which we know the more time kids are in their seats, the better they're learning, the better they are with their relationships with their peers and with the adults in their building. So it really is just a shift in mindset. You know, I don't know, how do you usually talk to people, Kathy, about and help them to shift that mindset? Because I think that it can be difficult when you're used to implementing consequences and discipline in one way.
Yeah, and you know, I find that educators a lot of times are asking for solutions, like they know what they're doing isn't working. You know, because they will say, yeah, it's the same kids getting suspended, it's the same kids getting detentions. We know it's not working, but we don't know what else to do.
Yeah. And
they come up against challenges. And so we talk about the natural and the logical consequences, and we will spend some time in trainings and talking about how we can shift things to a more restorative approach and having restorative conversations and talking about restorative discipline. And when we can help them shift and start to look at their consequences as being exclusionary and talking about the difference between a time in approach and a time out approach. And one of the things I love is seeing kind of like that aha moment when educators realize, like, oh my gosh, that clip chart is shame-based and how that is pushing away and breaking the connection. And like I joke about it, but it's true. Like I always have mommy guilt about the times I put my kids in timeout, right? Because that was like breaking the connection instead of sitting with them and helping regulate them. And so, and talking about that with educators. And so a lot of it is just really helping them understand that they need the co-regulation. If they didn't have it, when they were younger, or, they're not getting it, outside of school, we have to help them co-regulate with those time in approaches and helping them really understand a lot of that brain and body science. Yeah. And when people understand, no person goes to college to be an educator, or nobody signs up to work in a school to do things that are harmful or do things that, make traumatized children worse. No one does that. Nobody works in schools. And so it's really about just helping people understand. And when people learn the brain and body science and start to really understand how it's affecting kids, they really do want to do different. And so when we can help them understand that and start to giving them really practical strategies for these time in approaches, I really see a shift in that, a shift in the school policies and procedures.
What I love is that the interventions and the strategies that we recommend that are trauma informed are not just for the kids who have experienced trauma, right?
No,
they're such a benefit for all children.
Yeah.
So I know that a common concern for parents and teachers is, well, gosh, this one or this pocket of kids is constantly needing me to, provide them with attention or intervention. What about the rest of the students? What about them? And what we've learned is that, first of all, if you are proactive and you're getting to know all of your kids and you have a routine and structure in your classroom and all of those things, that's going to benefit everybody. And really, there's a lot of literature that talks about the other kids who are watching how you're intervening and what a benefit it is to them, because it's not scary, right? It's not shame-based. It's not exclusionary. It's not putting a child in the hall or in the principal's office or out of the classroom forever.
They feel safe too.
They feel safe because they say, gosh, so if I did something, or maybe what if I got dysregulated? What if I made a bad choice, or if I got into an argument with a friend, or I cheated on a test or something? I know how she'll respond or he'll respond. I'm going to have consequence, and there's going to be conversation, but I'm not going to get hurt or in trouble. It's going to be restorative. So that helps, because parents do ask, my poor kid is sitting in this class and, there's 2 or 3 that are constantly the frequent flyers.
Right. And when I talk with teachers, there's an exercise I like to put, and not just teachers, but specifically teachers, to get them to think about their body and their own feelings as a resource. That you're your own resource. So there's the concept of projective identification. It's a clinical concept. It's just a fancy way of saying, if I can't communicate to you, Matt, how I'm feeling, For instance, maybe I'm a child without the words, or I'm not sure how I'm feeling, I can't communicate. I'm inevitably going to do something that's going to elicit a response in you that matches the feeling I have. So if I feel angry and frustrated, but I can't really communicate, teacher Matt, I'm angry and frustrated, I might do something that makes you angry and frustrated. So I talk with folks about, it's kind of like sorting the laundry. If you reflect on your feelings, and you're like, I'm feeling why am I feeling this way? Why am I picking this up? Sometimes it's a kiddo around you that has a big question mark. Like, why are they doing that? Because we talk about behaviors. Mm-hmm. It's communication. That's what we teach. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Folks understand is behaviors communication. And kids, like to Kathy's point, it's hard for educators to really be honest with their feelings about kids who trouble them or make them angry or frustrated, because it's another fancy term, cognitive dissonance is a thing. You're making me feel about a child that my idealist undergrad spirit was, I'm here to teach the children well and let them lead the way because they're the greatest love of all, right? That's why we go into it, whatever it is, to help kiddos. And when there's a challenge there, we don't want to come to terms with, I don't like this kid. Well, okay, we can fancy it up and say, I don't like how you're behaving. Okay, but let's get to the truth. So I take folks through an exercise, and this is an abridged summary. I ask them to close their eyes if they're comfortable, but just to imagine it's a morning, and think of that kid. Not that one, that one. Because we want to deny that we have any bad feelings about the children that we help or teach, right? Think of that kid. Okay. Now the day is starting. It's 8:15, it's 8:20. Kid's not there yet. How do you feel? And I kind of go around, and sometimes I get honest responses. Some folks will say, well, I'm worried about him. And that's true. Others will say, hallelujah. He's not here. Okay, so where are my hallelujah people? Okay, so, all right, now I'm going to go get my master thesis out of the vault because it's the unicorn lesson plan I can never get through, and we're gonna get it, and we're excited. How are you feeling? So I take them through, how do you feel now? How do you feel now? Total shift. How are the students? How's the tension? How's the whatever? And you get different responses. Now the phone rings. Hello? He is, right? The child has arrived. And I check in, who has what to say, and Molly, social worker, will say, I'm glad they're here. Oh, good, I was worried. You know, mom's been having some health problems, and so, okay. And then everyone's like, ugh, Molly, quiet. We're talking about how we really feel. And just to explore how you feel, right? Feel frustrated. I feel disappointed. Now my unicorn lesson plan. I'm just gonna put it back in the vault. I think things would be better if he weren't here. We would learn more, it would be an easier day. Life's better when he's not at school. Okay, now pause. Those are really hard things to admit to yourself about feeling about a child that you're supposed to be in service to, right? But use it as a resource. So what you're saying is you feel frustrated, disappointed, hopeless, and overall things would be better if he weren't here. I'll bet that's exactly how that kid feels every day.
About themselves.
Ooh, right? Now, how are you're gonna greet that kid differently, right? So the kid that showed up to school just to ruin your day, and it was a Wednesday and staff meetings canceled, and maybe you've got drinks plans with your bestie, who knows what it is. But he shows up to school, and now, but if we don't really look at how we're feeling, that's a kid that came here just to ruin my day. That's not the teacher that I dreamed of being, right? That anyone dreams to be. I'm here to care about this kid, understand this kid. Now, this is just, as an example. Of course, there are no teachers out there like this, right? This is totally fictitious. But using that as a resource, your honest feelings, even if they're unpleasant, you're gonna greet the kid who came to ruin your day a lot differently than you're gonna greet the kid who really feels frustrated, disappointed, worried, convinced he can't learn, what he does know is that everybody feels life would be better without him there. You're gonna greet that kid a lot differently than the one that came just to ruin your day. So that's your own resource. If you can really just kind of be reflective and go ahead and have that wine date with your bestie and talk about it, but then take the extra step and say, I think his behavior is communicating to me what it's like to be him, because I feel that anger, frustration, and sense of hopelessness that I don't belong.
I find we project much more than we realize as educators, and it wasn't until speaking with former students in my classes about how much they get it. They know your opinions even if you're not saying them. Your behaviors and how you interact with different students, they all pick up on it, and whatever they feel you think about them, that sticks. Yeah. That sticks. Yeah. If I can take a minute, we have talked about the moment, when we talk about behavior and discipline, we're focusing on this moment, but what we haven't really discussed is all the other time that we're in school with these kids. And believe it or not, they're probably doing pretty well most of the time. And Shay, it just reminds me that as we work to build these connections, you have often spoke on this 5-to-1 noticing ratio, and I wonder if we can talk about that a little bit and how that can help support these times when it is time to discipline or talk about consequences.
Sure. No, it's a great strategy. And when I first learned the strategy, I learned it completely incorrect. So now that I know what the strategy is, I'm like, it makes so much more sense. So I always thought that 5-to-1 meant you have to notice a child positively 5 times more for every one time you correct them or you discipline them or you what's it called when you redirect to reroute, right? But that's not it at all. So what it is it's you have to notice kids 5 times more when they're on task, not dysregulated, right? They don't need redirection for every one time you notice them when they do. So if you think about how many times we notice the pocket of kids that are causing all of the challenging behavior in the course of a class period, that could be 35 times, right? How about we begin to notice when kids are on task, when they're doing well, when they're following the directions, when they're helping a friend or, lining up right away, that sort of thing. And that just, it shifts things a little bit. So, it kind of goes back to my original hope for the school year. It's, we so often, the problem, the challenge, the flaw, the thing that we don't like just gets so big that it overshadows all of the positive things. So I think just making a conscious effort and just being very intentional about noticing kids all the time, right? And when we say notice, it doesn't mean we have to sit down and have a intimate conversation with each child in our classroom. It's just eye contact. It's a wink. It's a hey. It's a how was that game last night? If you know something about a child. So 5-to-1 is a pretty cool strategy, and it's something that you could do either to start maybe just with one specific child where you say, okay, this child seems to be somebody who really needs more of my attention and connection. I'm going to start to notice him or her more often when they're following, right? Just that one child. It could be that you work with just maybe one of your tables of kids, if you've got kids in pods or something, but teachers are always asking how do we start? What do we do? And, just start small and just practice. And the more you notice, the more it becomes easier, and this is brain science too. It's that center in our brain, right? The RAS, or the reticular activating system, that the more we notice positive things, the more positive things are going to be seemingly right in front of us. So, it takes practice. So this is definitely something that we can shift and do. I've worked with districts, in particular one early childhood center. They receive the training, the 10 steps to create a trauma-informed, resilient school, and what always stands out to me is all they did for the first year was 5-to-1. Out of everything they learned, they said, we are going to focus on 5-to-1. And that was just how they launched becoming trauma informed. Sure, everybody had the training and everybody, knew about the brain science and different things that were helpful, but that was what they wanted their teachers to do.
And imagine a world where a school environment is collaborative in that approach too, that 5-to-1 approach. And so, it's not just the teacher in the classroom who is able to do this 5-to-1 noticing and praising, but, it streams across the entire campus where, whether it be someone in the front office, whether it be a coach, but we all know all the cool stuff that all these kids are doing. I mean, think about the kid in that class, that is a confident school. Be excited to go there and
Well, and it speaks to positive calls home, right? Instead of only calling home when something is wrong, it's call home or send a little note home, so-and-so had a great day, or super excited.
Who gets real mail anymore? I worked at the school in Ypsilanti that they had postcards with their mascot. When someone did something good, they sent it home, and they wouldn't give me one though. But anyway, moving on.
Well, it's like a friend that would only call you when they need something. Nobody's going to want a friend like that.
Right.
You want a friend who calls you when they need something and calls you when they have something maybe nice to say, or they're just calling you just to call, to check in.
Yeah.
Two things that's such a great point is we all have the negativity bias, and so give yourself a little bit of break. Our brains are programmed to solve problems, and to do that we have to find the problem, right? And so it will take time to train your brain to do the positive noticing. It's so worth it though, right? The early childhood center. And the other thing to consider, starting with that one child, like Dr. Soma said, that's such a great idea. And when you start to feel frustration, either at yourself or the child that's getting, that is showing a lot of these behaviors, is to remember that a lot of our kiddos, I tell people, and I'm sure Jenny said it and Dr. Soma said it too, is what you pay attention to is what's going to get repeated. And so a lot of our kiddos who maybe have challenging behaviors at home or in the community, they're showing challenging behaviors to get attention. And so that's what they're going to repeat at school. And so sometimes, we might have to work harder for those kiddos because that's how they get the attention in other places. And so we need to do that 5-to-1 for those kiddos even more so.
Well, and the way you describe it in training, I love, because we've always said they're doing that because they want to get attention. And Kathy always reframes it and says they're doing it because they need connection. They're doing it to get attention because they need connection. I mean, that's what they're hungry for. That is a universal need.
I had one of our little ones just the other day. One of the parents says, she keeps it together. She keeps it together all day in school. And it's just, I'm telling the teachers, there's no way. She's sitting there focused and So how is it? Well, she's likely collapsed. And so I asked her, well, what's going on? Oh, I hum and I clench, and then we talk polyvagal theory. These are things she's doing to keep it together. And so why are you not behaving this way in school? First grade. Because I know that if I let go, I'm going to act in a way and I'm going to get in trouble.
She keeps it together all day, yeah.
And I'm going to get in trouble, right? And when I get in trouble, I'm not going to go to recess. And if I don't go to recess, I can't make friends. So she's putting it together. They know. I keep it together or I have no friends. Yeah. That's the equation.
Well, and I also hear too, some kids who keep it together all day at school and then they kind of come unraveled at home. It's because school is a place of connection and it is so structured and they know what's happening next. And when they get home, mom or dad just got home from work, they're racing around, there's no structure, we don't know, maybe we're gonna have dinner at this time, maybe we're not, maybe we're gonna sit at the table, maybe we're gonna be in the car taking a kid to practice. So because school offers that connection and structure, some kids thrive. And then at home where they don't have as much structure, people always say, we hear all the time, oh my gosh, Christmas break was hard, we've gotta get back into a routine,
Right.
Or summer break is really hard. Kids just don't have that same sense of connection with so many caring adults and so many peers and the routine.
I do better with structure.
Yeah. Most of us do, in one way or another.
Well, and if we look at the real world, we started at the beginning of this talking about consequences in the real world, et cetera, and trying to mimic it. Well, what's more real world than the structure that this world demands of adults?
Going to work and same time every day.
Yeah. But, Jenny, that's interesting that you mention this need to just hold it all in and the social emotional implications of what this student is trying to accomplish in school. Well, spending all day just trying to hold it together, you can forget about any curriculum sticking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're so focused on keeping yourself regulated.
Yeah.
Well, it's like when you're lost and you're trying to find an address.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, I forgot even what the address is, or I can't see it. It's like you need to be calm enough to take it all in.
And we have to turn the music down when they're trying to find their directions.
Kids need to stop talking. Right?
Don't play the music while I'm trying to look for a road sign, because somehow looking, I don't know. Yeah.
Too much. It's too much.
Sensory overload.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, just me? Okay.
No, that's all of us. You need to turn the volume down, make the space smaller. You need to slow down, pause, all of those things to get back online.
Right, and so I say this a lot in training. If we, who are supposedly functioning adults in the world, if we have to do that, right, think about what these developing humans who may or may not have stress and trauma going on in their lives, their bodies and brains are still developing, and sometimes we put more expectations on them than we do ourselves. And so let's think about, would we want to put ourselves in those positions? If we don't, I don't get my lunch break taken away if I was late today. Would I have gotten my lunch break taken away? No. But we take kids' lunch breaks away when they don't perform the way they're supposed to, or they have to eat lunch in a certain room, or they get put in, out of school suspension for doing something wrong. But we don't do that to fully functioning adults in workplaces. So sometimes we got to put ourselves in the shoes of the kiddos, and if we wouldn't do it to ourselves as adults, why are we doing it to kids?
I say that a lot to folks that, boy, you're really overestimating Junior over here, 9 years old, who's, boy, what a genius. So he's going to sit there by himself and say,
Yeah.
let me deconstruct this now.
I woke up this morning just to make Jenny mad.
Yeah, I came to make Miss Sloan upset. I've done that now. But now I'm in this room. It's not as fun as I thought it would be. So I think I've really put myself in a bad situation here. What I think I'll do is I will break down my morning so I make sure I eat, and so I'm not temperamental. And no one's doing that.
Yeah.
No one's doing that. Not a 9-year-old. Not a 49-year-old.
Yeah, no.
Right? No one's doing that. So great point, Kathy. What we expect from them.
Once in a while.
And I think the question remains then, okay, so then why are there so many districts that might still be stuck in that type of routine? And, the discipline and the consequences may change from when their parents were in school, but that accountability doesn't go away just to drive it home. The discipline looks differently now in a trauma-informed, resilience-focused environment, but accountability is still very high. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. But I think where people get confused is they think that it's just a free-for-all. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wait, listen to what the conversation is. It's not to throw everything out. There definitely should be structure. There should be routine. There should be consequences. There should be expectations. So I think it's the way in which those are delivered. So I think that's what frustrates people, is because it's like an all or nothing. Yeah. That's one thing. I have a couple other things.
Sure.
I also think that it's because people don't give it enough time. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like, if you're going to start training for a marathon and you go out the first day and can barely run a mile and just say, skip it, I'm not going to do this anymore. These interventions that we're talking about need repetition, right? We have to do these things over and over and over again. So a child isn't going to believe that we're curious and want to get to know them if no other experience in their life has ever told them that an adult wants to get to know them, right? They're not going to be able to trust us if they can't trust other adults until they really see that they can, and that takes time. So I think people give up a little bit too quickly. The third thing is that I think teachers need to hear from leaders that it's okay to set the foundation so that academics can happen, right? So that learning can occur. We've got to set the foundation for connection and for regulation. Those two things are so important. So those could be the barriers.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you so much to all of you for joining us at another panel of Mental Health Matters. As a reminder, you can visit Starr.org to learn all about our 110th anniversary and our efforts to help end this national emergency in childhood mental health. You can also visit watch.starr.org, where we have dozens and dozens of hours of trauma-informed, resilience-focused content that you can put into action today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.